If you're sat here approaching 2026 watching this video and you're in the middle of planning your New Year, New You diet and maybe sat feeling guilt, shame or remorse about the things that you've eaten over the Christmas holiday, then this video is going to show you why diets don't work in 2026 and a much kinder, more sustainable, long-term approach to supporting your health and wellness in 2026 without having to go near another diet again. My name's Georgina Wright and I'm an intuitive eating counsellor and former physiotherapist. I spent decades doing every diet under the sun and hating my body image, only to end up with lots of disordered eating patterns such as binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, feeling really obsessed around food and with a really low sense of self-esteem. And how I transformed all of that was by learning the self-care evidence-based framework of intuitive eating. That not only transformed my health, but the ripple effect of that work transformed my life as well. And my aim with these videos is to help give you hope to do exactly the same thing. So when I think back to how long diets have been around, certainly in my lifetime, I went on my first diet when I was 18, so giving away my age a little bit there, that's nearly 25 years ago. And if you look further back into history, even some publications in, I think it was around the 1900s, demonstrate adverts for women offering a quick fix for weight loss to help them get back into their corset and dresses, more comfortably and to look better. And I dare say dieting goes back even further than that if you go sort of back into the history and publications that are available from even times prior to that. So dieting's been with us for a really long time. And the promise of these diets really alludes to you having a better life by being thinner in a lot of cases. And I definitely fell prey to that. I thought all my problems would be solved if I was thinner. My mood would be improved, my success would be better, I would find the relationship of my dreams if I was thinner. That was always what I came back to. And it was always a reason for me to start another diet. But all those diets that I did gave me none of that and instead gave me severe anxiety around food, all sorts of overeating, binge eating and emotional eating patterns, and actually just a really low sense of self-esteem and self-worth. And that went on for nearly 2 decades in total, bouncing around on different diets. And ultimately, in my case, I just kept gaining more and more weight, or I would yo-yo around, a certain weight. And it got really, really frustrating the more diets that I did. And ultimately, I just got completely exhausted with them. And my turning point was discovering the evidence-based self-care framework of intuitive eating. And the very first principle in the framework talks about the harm that diet culture does. And that really is a great starting point for anybody. And if you're watching this, this might be your starting point to really just look at the reality of what dieting does and why it just doesn't work. So there's some really great evidence out there to support what I'm saying, lots of different studies, and a couple of the ones that always stand out to me is a study that demonstrated that of a cohort of people that were studied on these particular diets, which ultimately is just restricting volume of food in an attempt to intentionally lose weight, 95% of the participants regained the weight within the first 2 to 5 years. Another study that observed people intentionally trying to lose weight through restricting food showed that the participants, 2/3 of those participants gained the weight back and more than when they started. So it's really obvious to see that they don't work, certainly not in the long term. They can be quite alluring in the short term when you maybe do something with the pursuit of weight loss, you lose the weight and you think, oh wow, I've cracked it. That was me definitely when I did my first 1 or 2 diets. But then you start to think, oh, I'll do another one because I gave in to my cravings, or I just started to think about food a lot while I was on the diet. So then I overate and then I started the diet again. And dieting is one of the biggest precursors to develop an eating disorder. It really wreaks havoc with you being able to really sort of keep in touch with hunger cues and fullness cues. And because it creates such a lot of obsession around food, this is all unfortunately quite a foundation for a step up into disordered eating, and then for some people to go on to develop eating disorders such as binge eating, bulimia, and anorexia. So we can already see why these diets are not only unsuccessful, but why they are actually really, really harmful. Another thing to share about why diets don't work is if we look at the wider impact of what happens if we do dieting in the long term, where we keep doing what's called yo-yo dieting. So we're on and off a diet, which often leads to our weight being unstable, going up and down and up and down. Again, this was me for quite a few years. So when we keep doing that and we keep forcing our body to be restricted, our biology sees that as a threat. So that can affect our metabolism, and it also increases food obsession. And there are some studies that show in the long term, yo-yo dieting can affect our cardiovascular system, it can affect our heart health, our blood pressure, and even things like bone density. So there's really not a lot of good things to say about dieting, but plenty to confirm the harm and the damage that they cause, and that they just simply don't work. So another really interesting study, and it's quite a well-known study, is called the Minnesota Starvation Study, and that was done in the 1940s during the war, whereby a group of psychologists observed a group of young men by putting them on a 1700 calorie diet to see what happened. It was quite a long study and a very thorough study, and the overall summary was that these young men over time became really obsessed with food. They had insatiable hunger, and the amount of food they were eating caused them to be consumed by the thoughts of food, to the point where they basically lost interest in everything else, and developed really disordered eating patterns. And even in their recovery, some of these men developed binge eating, as they were observed in the recovery phase of upping their food intake again. So again, just really clear to see from all these different studies how really just diets are really unsuccessful and really quite harmful. So if diets don't work, then what does work? What would be a better way to care for yourself and your health? And the answer there, of course, is intuitive eating. So intuitive eating was developed in the 1990s by two incredible dietitians called Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And they worked traditionally in dieting when they first qualified, and they realised how ineffective prescribing weight loss was, and a lot of their clients would get into this trap, like I've just explained with the different studies and the evidence, where the diets backfired, they blamed themselves, and they ended up just going around in a circle with this dieting advice that wasn't helpful. And so was born the intuitive eating framework. And the great thing about intuitive eating is it's an evidence-based self-care framework. So to date, there's now over 150 studies, I believe, in lots of different contexts to demonstrate the great value that intuitive eating brings to our health. So we've got 10 principles, and the first one is called Reject Diet Culture, and that can be quite a nice starting point if you're not familiar with the work, and it just goes into more detail on what I've shared in this video to sort of set the scene really for how a lot of us arrive at intuitive eating, basically when we've just got so exhausted and fed up with diets that we think there must be something else I can do. That's often your starting point for intuitive eating, and I know that was definitely my starting point. And the aim with intuitive eating ultimately is to help you rebuild trust with your body again and your relationship with food. And when you start to rebuild that trust from the inside out, that enables you to connect back in with your inbuilt wisdom and physiological cues that you were born with, like hunger and fullness. So really, we're all natural intuitive eaters, but that just gets disconnected along the way if we find ourselves going through life and sort of starting to take on board various dieting messages and beliefs. Intuitive eating also explores the pivotal role that body image plays in our health and how to approach body image with a more compassionate and neutral mindset, looking at valuing who we are over how we look as a mainstay of that principle of the work, and also looking at how to respect our bodies through moving our bodies without thinking of it as a punishment or as a way to burn energy. So moving our bodies with kindness and thinking about how we want to move to feel good as the priority for why we would move in the first place. It also covers gentle nutrition, so it's very important that nutrition is a part of intuitive eating, because ultimately we're going to be eating with variety and balance, but without the restriction or the rules that we have picked up, unconsciously almost through dieting. And finally, we look at food rules and making peace with food. Again, often a side effect of dieting is developing all this self-criticism and all these rules around food that usually trips us up and sort of backfires when our cravings get too much. So that, alongside emotional eating support, enables you to work through and let go of different food rules that have been hijacking your health, and really just allowing you to feel more peaceful around food and be able to once again just eat with much more balance and kindness and compassion and variety, and quieten down all that food noise so that you can kind of just get on with life and focus on the things that are truly important to you. Finally, some benefits that are well documented of intuitive eating thanks to all these studies. So there's so many to mention, really. I'm not sure where I would start, but a handful of benefits that I think would be helpful for you to know, given that you're watching this video at the start of 2026, and this might be a video that changes what you're going to do for your health this year. Is some of the main benefits are decreased preoccupation with food, decreased overeating, decreased binge eating, decreased emotional eating, improved blood pressure, improved heart health, improved cholesterol levels, improved blood sugar levels, better sense of contentment, improved body image, decreased food obsession and thoughts of food. And that's just to name but a few. So the benefits cover your physical well-being as well as mental well-being as well as emotional well-being. And if you do follow a spiritual path in life like myself, then your spiritual well-being will improve tenfold. So I hope that video's helped you today and inspired you to think kindly about what would be the best thing you could do for your health this year if you were actually going to be compassionate, kind to yourself, patient, and take on this new year with a different mindset to all those fast, quick fix, unsustainable New Year programs. And to help you get started, there's a download below, which is my beginner's guide to intuitive eating.